Summer scouting for the 2024 NFL draft class continues, and we are hitting the edge group today. Last year, we had Will Anderson Jr. and Lucas Van Ness, Miles Murphy, a whole host of names. But don't sleep on 2024. There's a lot of talent in this class. Who is the top edge heading into summer scouting? We'll discuss all of that next on the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find me on Twitter at DP_NFL. I'm a national scout with the Draft Network and your local and favorite running back guru. And as always, the champ is here, Mr. LSU, my boy Keith Sanchez. You can find him on Twitter at The Talent Code. Keith, talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? This is Keith Sanchez, senior draft analyst with the Draft Network. Man, and like DP says, what? 2019 national champ. Yes, that means Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and a whole lot of other draft picks, man. But you know why we're here? Myself, Damian Parsons, we're here to bring you championship level content surrounding the NFL draft. Yes, the draft don't stop, man. We're on to 2024, right? We're talking scouting. We're throwing names out there, right? And DP, we've been, what's the word, man? We've had it good, right? Because we've had back-to-back classes, the 2022 NFL draft, the 2023 NFL draft class, where we've had some really good edge rushers. But DP, this one for me appears to be unknown, man. Will Anderson has been the top edge rusher for 2-3 years now. But I have a question I want to pose to you. Who's the top edge rusher, right? Who's that top tier guy in this 2024 NFL draft class, in your opinion?
Man, I think you got to go down to Florida State's Jarrett Verse, Keith, to kick it off. A guy that was a projected top 20 pick for the 2023 NFL draft, and then he shocked the world, the draft world, when he said, I'm going back to Florida State. Shout out to Mike Norvell for recruiting his guys back, because he smells blood in the water in the ACC, and he thinks that they have a shot of winning that conference and possibly making the playoffs. So I'm pretty sure that was part of the coach's plan to get Jarrett Verse back, their best defensive player, and he has the size, the arm length, the power, the explosiveness off the edge, man. And he plays with a relentless motor from when I've watched him as well, Keith. So I think right now, when you walking into summer scouting, I think it's got to be Jarrett Verse. But there's some other names, Keith, because you have Jarrett Verse. You actually scouted them. Because we all thought he was coming out in 2023. So you scouted him, but you also scouted you also watched Will Anderson's teammate, Dallas Turner, over at Alabama.
Yeah, and you're talking about a running mate, right? So the guy that played opposite, or the guy that spelled him at times, and you don't see the same physical nature. This is more of a true edge rusher, right? Like a pass rusher. And he's very bendy, he's fluid, he's smooth, he is explosive. So I'm expecting, and we're talking about Alabama edge rusher Dallas Turner. That's what we're talking about, man. And I'm expecting this guy to really take off, man. He's going to be the full-time starter. It's really difficult, right, to kind of emerge when Will Anderson and just everything that he was as a player, person, personality, just, leader on the team. It's kind of hard to emerge, right, when you're talking about a 1-2 punch. So I think this is Dallas Turner's time. You're going to see this guy. I'm expecting him to get into the double-digit sack range, right? And in Alabama, over the past couple of years, they've had edge rushers come out of there. But I think with Will Anderson, he's probably the best one they've had probably since Nick Saban has been in Alabama. And then now you're transitioning to a guy who's a little bit different stylistically, but I expect production to still be there in Dallas Turner.
No, and he's one, like, I'm glad you clarified that for people. He's a edge, like a pass rusher, that bendy 240 pound. He's built a little different. That first step quickness can really get around the arc and pressure quarterbacks off that outside shoulder and outside shade of the tackle. I'm excited to see him, Keith.
Yeah, and DP, because I want to clarify and, like you said, clear it up for people when they're like, okay, well, what are you saying? He's an edge rusher, and Will Anderson was an edge rusher. What do you mean he's a true edge rusher? And it's like there's different methods, right? Like Myles Garrett and the Bosa brothers, right, are one version of edge rusher who are big physical guys that play against the run. And then you do have a guy like a Von Miller. And that's what we're trying to say. Like they're different stylistically. Yes, they align in the same position, but they're different stylistically to what they offer to your team at the edge rusher position.
No, 100%. No, that's correct, Keith. And because of the fact of the matter is, those type of guys with the Von Miller, the Dallas Turners, I forget the guy's name. Nick, is it Nick Benito? Right, that came out last year. 2022, went to Denver. Those are guys that are going to consistently threaten the edge, the outside shoulder, and threaten the arc. Where you look at some of these other guys that are more power rushers, inside counters, things of that nature. And that's what Keith is just really explaining to y'all. Is like there's two different ways of winning as an edge rusher, and Dallas Turner's that true guy. And to talk about kind of JT Tuimoloau. I think I said that correct, from Ohio State, Keith. Like I didn't realize he was 270.
Did you get eyes on him? Like have you watched some of him? Because he's a name that you've been hearing about a lot, and since his high school days. And for our listeners, this is a former 5-star kid, so he's been in the media and the spotlight a whole lot. But it just is weird because he's kind of flown under the radar also. Like I know that's almost opposite positions, right? I'll say like he's been in the spotlight, but he's flown under the radar, meaning that like you knew a lot about him in high school, but his transition to Ohio State, I haven't seen much of him. I heard much of his name because of the hype that came. So I wanted to just see if you watched him, able to see some glimpses of him and what you think the ceiling is with this guy.
Man, like he's a very versatile guy, Keith. And guys like, I think he's 6'4", I think he's 6'3", 6'4". He's listed at 270. Didn't realize that when you watching him on tape because he moved a lot better than the guy that you would assume at 260, 70 pounds. He stands up in a 2-point stance and rushes as like a stand-up edge rusher. He puts his hand in the dirt in 3-point stance and in the 4-point stance. If I remember correct, I think it was the Maryland game where he was just a terror. Strip sacks, forced fumbles, all of it. Dropped them off in the coverage at 260, 270. He's an impressive kind of athlete in terms of the way he's able to move. So this is a guy where you think about what he's going to be able to do and the weight that's going to be on him and that defense's shoulders with no star quarterback at Ohio State. You know what I mean? So now it's like, all right, he sets the edge in the run game. All of that, man. That's why I wanted to make sure to bring him up because I feel like his name is absolutely belongs in that edge one discussion because he has all the physical tools and traits, and he's a much better athlete for a guy his size than I expected.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch him. Like you said, who you just profiled, it seems like this is somebody that's going to be different, right? In the sense of the fact of he seems like he's going to be a highly productive player, but then also his frame and his size is going to kind of lean towards, okay, what is he, right? Like, is this guy, do we kick him inside at defensive tackle at 270? Do we allow him to play edge? Can he stand up? Like how, and then like sack production. And it's different ways to get to it, right? And that's why we had these conversations because I think about New Orleans Saints edge rusher Cameron Jordan. He's 265 pounds, strong, powerful guy, but he's a consistent sack guy. So are we looking at something like that, man? And I think it's going to be really fun, man. So he's
flexible too, Keith. Like he can bend. He got some bend to him. Yeah, he's got some bend to him.
I'm excited to watch. I can't wait till we get into cross checks in a month, man. But look, DP, man, we've went over the top part right now. I hate to even say the top part, but the bigger names and the guys that we've seen the proven production already. But this is such a deep edge class that I'm not sure that we like when it comes down to actual draft time that just in these three guys we've covered edge number one, right? Because there's even more guys out there. So coming up next, man, we want to continue to unlock these names, throw them at y'all, have these discussions. So we're going to get into, I want to say tier 2, but tier 2 of the known names in college football that are draft eligible guys that can potentially be high draft picks next year.
Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. Yes, the Nuggets swept the Lakers. So again, you can make you some money because right now new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1 $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win, guys. What I love about FanDuel Sportsbook app is it's great. A great promotions every day. You can find different things to bet on, things that really tickle your fancy and align with what you're looking for. Their app is safe, secure, super easy to use, and there's nothing better than getting paid instantly. I don't want to win $100,000 and have to wait 2 weeks for it to clear. I want to be able to get my money immediately, right? So getting paid instantly is a big thing, and I love that about this sportsbook app. And like I said, there's no better place to bet on all the NBA playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook, which is FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NBA. These contenders, guys, those dark horse, those guys that, yeah, the top 3 names are bigger names in this class, but Keith, there's some other names, man, and one of them is a guy that I think you just watched, Chop Robinson over at Penn State, transfer. I think after 2021 from Maryland, he transferred to Penn State, so he stayed in the Big Ten. Just kind of tell us, man, what did you see from Chop?
Yeah, DP, go ahead and cue this up, man. Clip this up, man. And I'm about to make a statement, man. And this is what I watched. I've just watched Chop Robinson, Des Moines Robinson, edge rusher from Penn State, and I couldn't help but think this is what Micah Parsons would have looked like if he played the edge rusher position at his time at Penn State. So when I watch Chop Robinson, you see an explosive playmaker, a guy that's really versatile in his edge rush. He has a high motor. He's physical. He can drop in coverage. Like I said, he's versatile, and he's an impact player. So like I said, once again, man, watching Chop Robinson, I couldn't help but think that, man, this is what Micah Parsons would have looked like if he played true edge rusher at Penn State.
That's a big statement, Keith.
I couldn't help it, DP. I couldn't help it when I looked at it, when I checked it out. I said, man, this is because and I would say this, that maybe they don't have all of the same physical tools, right? But yeah, you know I'm willing to stand on with Chop Robinson is the motor. Like this guy has a motor. Like he wants it. Like he has a violent temperament, in his approach to the football game. He wants to make those plays. Like it's very similar to, when we watch Micah Parsons, and then, it's the small plays, right? When you see him make a play 40 yards down the field, but then ESPN clips it, they run it back, and you see he made a play 40 yards down the field, but he probably ran a total of 80 yards because he came all the way from the opposite hash, things like that. And that's what you see with Chop Robinson. This is a high motor guy. I wouldn't be surprised at some point we see these guys work together in the off season, or it's kind of like a big brother, little brother type situation, him transitioning to the NFL. But I will say this, there are some things that Chop Robinson has to work on, right? Like there is some development there. There is some, lower body stiffness that I've seen. But man, you're talking about a fun, exciting player. And that's why I said, I don't want to, just say, oh, these are tier 2 players, because right, he's a guy that I think can jump into that, that first segment that we talked about, right, as contenders for Edge 1 if he continues to develop.
Keith, I love that. Now, I'll bring another name over off the West Coast in the Pac-12. Bralen Trice, Keith, was 6'4", 255, 260. A guy that what I loved about when I saw him, and I haven't finished the deep dive, but what I've watched of him, the hand usage, the refinement in terms of understanding how to clear himself and clear the hands and dislodge the hands of offensive linemen, win and soften those angles for himself to make it quicker, right? To be able to turn, flip those hips and close on the quarterback. And a guy that, to me, he not only had the outside game, but he had inside counters too. So it's like he has the power to set the edge in the run game as well. I like his first step quickness. I think this is a young man that you can use as a hand in the dirt rusher, but also stand him up if you need to. This is a really I remember watching him towards the end of the season. I was just like, man, like I was hoping he came out. I was like, man, like this kid can ball. But when you really get into the tape and you see a guy that just has all the tools and then the physical ability and physical makeup in terms of his body type. Yeah, this is a talented kid.
Do you think his upside is tier 1, like, top around 1 type of upside?
I think he does have that type of upside. I think the main thing I want to see then is, of course, the raw testing numbers where he actually tests at things of that nature. Well, but we were way a ways away from that.
Right,
We
right,
got months on months before we get those type of numbers. But I'm really interested. And then he got his teammate ZTF Zion Tupuola-Fetui. I think I nailed that one on the first go. I didn't even practice that either. But ZTF, I know he's battled some injuries, and everything. But now you think about, like, I feel like both of these guys have the opportunity, Keith, in this loaded quarterback-centric Pac-12 conference where they're going to have the opportunity to get after the quarterback. They have a quarterback in themselves, and Michael Penix, who's going to put up the points with his two receivers. Right? We've already talked about it. That offense has the firepower, but when you have those two edge rushers, all right, if my offense can put up 35, 40, 42, and we go and throw for throw with Bo Nix, and it's a passing situation, I can let my dogs loose. I can let the dog pound go.
Yeah, and not only that, it'll be fun because you're talking about two edge rushers, right? So they're going to complement each other. You can't just necessarily, slide protection consistently one way, because now you're giving the other guy one-on-one. So it'd be really interesting to see what, from a game plan perspective, right, what offenses decide to do as far as protection and things like that, because you're talking about, you just outline two high level pass rushers. So like you said, you can't double team one and leave the other one on the island. So it'll be really interesting to see how they get the approach, and also who benefits from the production. Like, is this going to be a situation where both guys end up with between 8 and 10 sacks, or is this a situation where one guy is going to have 12 and one guy is going to have 7? You just don't know how those splits are going to come in. But I think it's going to make for a rather interesting conversation down the stretch, especially with this edge rusher group.
No, 100%. And what the other guy I wanted to mention, he's not in either of our regions, so we won't see him until cross checks. But that's Laiatu Latu over at UCLA, and I've heard his name buzz quite a bit, Keith, and that's a guy I'm really interested to see. I know, shout out to our boy Brentley Wiseman. He's the one who has the pleasure of watching Laiatu, because he's 6'4", 265, and like last year, he was a sack leader for them, man. He 12 sacks, 8 QB hits, 45 pressures. A guy that was able to get after the quarterback at a high clip. And again, like we talked about with Bralen, Trice, and even ZTF, he's in the Pac-12. What's he going to see? A lot of high-octane offenses that want to throw the football, so it's going to give him a lot of opportunities to get after the quarterback.
Nah, I agree, man. Listen, you know that Laiatu Latu is talented because, Brentley is an Oregon guy. You know what I'm saying? So for him to give credit to another school, man, another player, another school, it really gets at him. But man, he came in with glowing reviews about this guy, so I'm excited to watch him. We're talking about, like we said, man, this is a deep edge rusher class. We are 6, 7, 8 guys in already. But man, we want to transition to the rather unknown names, and the unknown names are still names that people just haven't talked about them yet when we're talking about on a broad scale, but these are still highly talented guys. There's a former 5-star sitting out there at USC that I want to get into. So coming up next, man, we're going to continue to unload these names, talk about these guys, because I promise you they will be impactful when it comes down to the college football season and into the NFL draft.
These unknown names, the sleepers, that's what we call them. Time to wake up and wake up everybody else about these names, guys. And Keith, you hinted at a 5-star, former 5-star down over at USC. Who you talking about?
I am talking about USC edge rusher Corey Foreman. Like I said, former 5-star kid. I had the opportunity to watch him when he was in high school. You're talking about all of the physical tools he has, all of them. So listen, last year, he had a bit of a dip, right? Bit of a dip in production. He didn't have any sacks, but when you talk about the physical tools being there, all of them are there. And all it takes is 1 year, right? It takes 1 year for you to really turn things on. And I think Corey has the opportunity to do that. So when I looked at these under the radar names, the names that can potentially come out of nowhere, he was definitely a name. I was like, you know what? Let me bring him up and, just introduce him to the Locked On family. So that way, if things happen, especially USC, we know Caleb Williams, Heisman winner, right? There are going to be a lot of primetime situations. There are going to be a lot of lights glowing. So he's going to have every opportunity to produce.
Nah, Keith, I want to bring up, a guy that really kind of caught my eye in terms of when I was just going through some names. And that's the name itself caught my attention. Chico Bennett Jr. over at Virginia, man. 6'4", 250, 255. And even last year, Keith, 24 pressures, 1 QB hit, but he had 8 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. And when you talk about a guy you need to know, one thing I was watching a little bit of him versus Matthew Bergeron, who was the left tackle at Syracuse, who's now going to be kicked in that guard for Atlanta Falcons after being drafted in the second round. Like you talk about the first step kind of explosiveness, the drop the shoulders, drive through that drive phase going, and put Bergeron on his heels. Bergeron was retreating. Like he couldn't get out the blocks fast enough. But then you look at the body type, you see a physical, a strong frame, a really nice, dense body as well, who also works in the twist and stunt game, understands how to sell the outside path and then, loop back around to get into the face of the quarterback. A guy that looks like he has good arm length. Like I said, power to really stand up as an edge rusher against the run as well. I'm really excited to get into his tape in general, but just in totality, but watching him against, Matthew Bergeron, I was like, okay, there's something to this guy. Then I looked into the numbers. I said, okay, there really is something, something to this guy, because he put up some good numbers, but the tape also, from what I've seen, kind of correlates with the numbers. And it's not a name that I've never heard this name before, Keith. I tell you straight up, I've not heard of Chico Bennett Jr., but us in the Locked On family, we know who he is now.
But I will keep going. I will keep rolling. I have Texas edge rusher Barron Sorrell. I highlight this guy, man. He is from New Orleans, from the boot, man. But listen, went to University of Texas, 6'3", 255, 260 pounds, athletic. Had a productive year last year, 5.5, almost 6 sacks. He had one game against TCU where he had a sack and a half and 11 tackles. So we're talking about a guy that's extremely active, a guy that's extremely impactful right on the defensive side of the football. And with Texas, losing some of the guys, I think Keandre Coburn, and then they lost the edge rusher. Man, I'm slipping his name, but I really did like him. But he wound up getting drafted to the Philadelphia Eagles. His name is missing me. But they lost some guys up front, so they're going to be more relying upon guys like Barron Sorrell to step up and really come into that leadership role. So I'm expecting his sack production to take off more. And like we just talked about the Pac-12, the Big 12 is the same way, right? Like they are going to throw the football no matter who's playing quarterback. The Big 12 is going to throw the football. And Quinn Ewers, this offense, right? They should be able to put it to where they're playing ahead a lot. And if they're playing ahead, then that means that the opposing team's offense has to throw the football. So that means he'll have plenty of opportunities for sack production. But, man, definitely another name to check out for. Like I said, man, another big program, big-time program, a guy that already has proven sack production, good year last year. Now it's just time for him to build on that.
Nah, I love that, Keith. And in the beginning, you talked about a former 5-star. I'll talk about one as well. Xavier Thomas over at Clemson, a young man that was limited to 3 games last year due to a foot injury. And at 6'3", 250, 260. And with the departure of KJ Henry and Miles Murphy to the NFL, Xavier Thomas is the guy off the edge as a 6-year senior. And he was a top 5 player, I think, in the nation coming out when he was coming out as a recruit. You know what I mean? So it's like he's I think he's a top defensive end and everything. Like, this is a young man that's extremely talented, has a good first step, power, knows how to win off the edge. Now he's very similar to KJ though, Keith. If you remember the conversation we had about KJ Henry, it was, man, he looks the part, he's got all the tools, he gets back there. But the sack production, I think his sack production is a little bit better than what KJ's was. But it was both of those guys were high pressure edge rushers, and all pressures are sacks that are not finished. For those who don't know, that's what pressures really are. Pressures are sacks that the defender did not close the deal on. And that I talked about him as, for those who don't know, I'm the new host of the Locked On Clemson podcast. Go subscribe and tap into that. But I talked about him, on my first episode on Monday as a guy that I'm excited to see. So I wanted to bring that name up, as well as Josiah Stewart, who transferred from Coastal Carolina, Keith. Guys, he transferred from the mid majors. He transferred from the Sun Belt. Now he's at Michigan. You know what I mean? To add another pass rusher in that room. They got a lot of different guys. They don't have a guy just yet, but they got a lot of different guys that they can throw at opposing offenses. And then Brandon Dorless, we talked about Brentley Wiseman. He's an Oregon Duck. You know what I mean? So like Brandon Dorless is one of the guys over there who I really like, as well as a name that doesn't get a lot of buzz, but he's very talented, physical. He looks the part, and he can really get after the quarterback inside and outside game.
I'm gonna throw one name out there, man. Just in the realm of former 5 stars, right? I'm gonna throw out another name, and he's at a premier program, Jack Sawyer. This is when you talk about being in line with the Bosa brothers. Jack Sawyer has that type of potential. We're talking about both Bosa brothers. That's a tongue twister right there. Then you're talking about transitioning to Chase Young. He can be next up when we're talking about those 6'5", 250-pound edge rushers that, hand in the ground, true 4-3 defensive end. So definitely. His name is last, but it's definitely not least. We could have probably said his name and mentioned him a whole lot earlier. Some of the sack production is there, even with guys like Zach Harrison being there, right? He has back-to-back, I think, 4 sack seasons. So with him being a premier guy, him having a guy that you talked about, right? JT Tuimoloau on the other side, this should be his time to shine. So we're talking about him at the back end of this podcast. Make no mistakes about it. He can very well be top 10 pick, top 5 pick. If we're talking about Lucas Van Ness going early, I can easily see a guy like Jack Sawyer, teams wanting to get their hands on him because he plays the game the right way. So remember, Jack Sawyer, Locked On NFL Draft, you heard it first.
I love that, Keith. The Lucas Van Ness mention. I love that a lot, guys. But listen, that's our show, man. We broke down these edge rushers. There's a lot of names, a lot of talent that you need to keep your eye on during the 2023 college football season, heading into the 2024 NFL draft season. We got a lot of time left, but we want to continue to introduce names to you guys, so you know. So as always, go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it's available. We thank y'all as always for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day, Monday through Friday. You know what you are. You're our family, but you're our every single dayers, and we love y'all and I appreciate y'all. Tap in, tune in with us tomorrow because we're gonna get into the corners and this corner class. And is it anywhere closer to what we saw in 2023? We're going to have some more names and tell you about the depth or lack thereof once we really dive into it. But as always, in terms of Twitter, you can find Keith Sanchez at The Talent Code. I'm Damian Parson, DP_NFL. Come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.